Okay, so this is the explosion of Apple II. A 29 kiloton nuclear bomb.
Our families and our nation in the nuclear age.
Part of Operation Teapot, the series of 14 nuclear tests conducted in 1955 at the Nevada National Security Site, an area that has the natural beauty of a rhinoceros's leg. And you can guess that they tested structural strength and the integrity of photo stations and thermal radiation protection. But today I went to an empty mall parking lot to see the historic remnants of another thing that they tested: the mannequins. Why did they stock the test site with mannequins wearing clothes from JCPenney?
I looked at the mannequins sitting about so indifferently.
They were stock mannequins made by a company called LA Darling, mannequins that were blown up, tumbled, covered, and scorched. It explains a lot about nukes in the 50s, a lot about the Cold War, and maybe even a little about us today.
Operation Q.
No. This is not where we start. With nuke testing programs, you've got this weird little dividing line. Parking lot Phil, take it away.
Show you. There's the civil side and the military side.
On this side, you've got the bombs, the tests, the war capability. On this side, you have the newsreels, education, and the mannequins. So they are connected, but also separate. The Apple II test, this boom, is part of Operation Teapot, which are all these special weapons tests done at the Nevada test site in 1955. It's 65 miles north of Las Vegas, 1,360 square miles in the middle of nowhere. And in this operation, they did more than 40 test series here. So basically just a ton of tests. These were all relatively small compared to later detonations, but they were huge on a human scale. The thing that made the Apple II test unique wasn't that it was just a test of a bomb. It was a test of the response to the bomb, the other side of that parking lot line. This was run by the Federal Civil Defense Administration. The FCDA was a sprawling government agency responsible for coordinating the home response. All those atomic newsreels you see, the voiceover so stolid that you can feel the square jaw.
The explosive power of atomic bombs used in this test was in the kiloton range.
The FCDA, they supplied the paranoia in Cold War paranoia. And that is why they bothered with the mannequins. Like most JCPenney's, this one is a ghost now, but you can still see some of the fixtures inside. There's a sign up here.
I feel bad for it. I feel bad for JCPenney.
Operation Q was the FCDA's big nuke test. There were 6 key areas, but the big idea was to bring a bunch of people from all over the country to watch the bomb go off and then see how they responded. The idea was to simulate a nuclear attack and, as importantly, how you recovered from it. In addition to a bunch of testing materials, they built 2 houses, a wood one and a brick one. You can still see them today. It's eerie. They were stocked full of food and furniture, grandma's pantry, a supply for a family of 4. All this was donated from merchants across the country. And then they added the mannequins, which wore clothes donated by JCPenney.
Rows of mannequins were set up in the open facing the blast.
The experiment was prolonged due to high winds so many times that people started calling it Operation Miscue. Operation Miscue is actually the joke name that this Nevada showgirl took. Remember Las Vegas? You know, look at her headpiece. But eventually the miscue stopped and Operation Q began. We have testimonies from the humans who saw the blast. Most mention the blinding light, and the tremor in their bodies. The mannequins issued no statements. Some survived, some had freakish results. Plastic babies huddled while their plastic brothers lay on the floor. Men who were watching their living room paint dry were suddenly toppled over their coffee tables. But these mannequin tests, even though they were surrounded by dosimeters and cloaked in techno jargon, they weren't done for science. The reason they were done? Just look at the roast beef.
The mass feeding group was improvising to feed the test observers. I particularly remember some roast beef. It was done to perfection and roasted in cans which could have been salvaged from demolished buildings.
After the test, everyone lined up and had a delicious meal of post-apocalyptic food. Is there anything more 1950s than getting excited about your roast beef after the collapse of civilization? But it is not just kitschy that they were super proud of their tomato juice, their roast beef, and their baked beans.
You know the curly fries are the best part, right? I just want to be clear. The FCDA should have paired their roast beef work with curly fry manufacturing capabilities.
This was a test of post-nuclear food rationing, a dry run for survival after detonation. The real meaning of this trip was a dynamic you see throughout the 1950s and the Cold War. The civil defense side of the line, to make the apocalypse terrifying enough to take action, yet mundane enough to believe that you could survive it. FCDA volunteers were pulled from all over the country to act out the recovery. The mannequins were less a diagnostic test of a bomb's effects than a test of recovery efforts. They knew which mannequins got blown up and which ones lived. But the post-bomb recovery was where all the energy went. Each mannequin was recovered and then turned over to litter bearers of the casualty service after being properly tagged. Trainings for those disaster recovery services extended to sanitation, engineering, police, rescue, fire, and communications. But here's the thing, the training was as important for what happened after Operation Q was over. It continued. Look at this list of participants in the operation. They are from all over the country. In addition to the TV show about Q that 100 million people saw, this was a way to distribute civil defense knowledge, or propaganda, depending how you look at it, around the country. People came from Portland, Des Moines, Bemidji. Then they went home and they talked about what they saw. They became walking billboards for Operation Q. And it worked. Local newspapers reported on Operation Q attendees, further distributing the message that 100 million people had already seen on TV. The biblical horror of the nuclear apocalypse was real, and it should be planned for like a particularly important PTA meeting. Companies were just another channel for the same training. The mannequins were new to train the general population on how to deal with a nuclear attack. And yes, the training included everyone who was at the Nevada test site that day, but also everybody who saw the mannequins.
Do you remember this young lady? This tattoo mark was left beneath the dark pattern.
Now, to be clear, there were weird tests too, from standard structural testing to stuff like dogs being fed for a year on beef stew that was stored near the blast zone to see if it was radioactive. Sorry, dogs. Does this all sound familiar after a year of having our behavior, expectations, and our entire lives shaped by a public crisis? Do you remember the Michigan doctor?
My name is Jeffrey Van Wingen.
This video went viral last year, just when the coronavirus pandemic became kind of a real thing. None of us knew what to do. And so you ended up with a doctor's video going viral as he disinfected his pickles and soaked his fruit in the sink.
But we should be spending ideally 20 seconds on each piece of fruit, just washing and scrubbing.
We can see the absurdity of nuked mannequins and radioactive beef stew because we have some distance from it. We tested the nukes because of geopolitical chess and pushing the scientific envelope, but we nuked the mannequins because making a plan to count and feed and transport the public in the event of war was a real need, but it was also a way to say, hey, we know what we're doing. We're in control here, right?
I'm gonna finish this sandwich now because I didn't want to be eating it during the serious parts of this video. Please like and subscribe. I'd be super appreciative. I've put some sources down in the description, and now I'm gonna finish the meal that I started while I still can.